It is the fall of 2022, which means Inside the Zone returns with Justin Kinney of Optimum Performance Sports. I'm Glenn Marini, and on Mondays throughout the rest of the high school football season, we'll be handling all your picks, your prognostications, all of the predictions, all sorts of information.
Everything will get wrong. It will be amazing.
2 quick points. You're obviously wearing a Bears polo,
Yeah.
which sort of discounts all your football knowledge.
It does.
Secondarily, every time we tape on this set, it looks like ESPN. This set is so much nicer than what we are about to do.
I know.
I want to leave it out there.
I don't know if the set lifts us up or we bring down the set.
It's got to be one or the other. It's got to be one or the other. Before we get too much into conference previews, 2022, as we enter a new football season, we're starting to be a little bit more removed from the pandemic, from COVID, when that was something we had to talk about the last couple of seasons. So going into this season, overarching, taking a look at Northeast Indiana, what are you most looking forward to?
Well, I think that's part of it is getting back to the normalcy. Even last year, we had some fits and spurts there at times with COVID, and hopefully we're past that. But overall, when you look at the SAC, the final year of 9 weeks, 9 regular season games, right? So who can win the SAC in this last year of its current configuration? And the fact that we had a 3-way tie last year, it really, potentially indicative of how, spirited and how competition can be big and tough every Friday night in the SAC.
And I feel like every 3, 4, 5 years we have an off season. I don't want to get into individual people because these are high school kids. They're 15 to 18-year-old kids. We have a season where we see a bunch of people transfer in the summer.
Yeah.
And this was part of that cycle again, that every 3rd, 4th, or 5th year where we talk a lot about transfers in the off season. So when you take a look at how transfers, we see it in college football. I mean, the transfer portal is the Wild West. This is high school stuff.
Yeah.
But how does that reshape the landscape? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? How do you approach the season when we've seen so much, I don't want to say turmoil, but just a lot more movement than we're used to when it comes to transfers in high school football?
I think it's easy to fall into that. This team's recruiting, that team's recruiting, this kid's unhappy, so he's going to go over here and he's not playing enough or not playing enough time. I really think you treat each of these situations individually, and some may be for really sound reasons, and others may be quick judgments because you're not getting favorable playing time or whatever to play. So I think to each his own. I do think it's an added dynamic, though, when you have a big city like Fort Wayne, that you're inevitably going to have that. I think it adds a little bit of excitement, but at the same time, it's kind of nice when you get in the outlying areas and these kids you're going to be watching them at Columbia City or East Noble or wherever for the next multiple years. There's something refreshing about that as well. So kind of a dichotomy, a little bit of love-hate kind of thing.
Yeah, I think we have to deal with it a lot less than Indy does. I think they deal with it more or less every year in some way, shape, or form. Again, with us, it's every 3, 4, 5 years you get a summer where there's a lot of movement or something like that. Plus, also, I mean, you can't discount, as you mentioned, like the family dynamic. When you're going public to private or private to public, some of the financial concerns there as well. So there's a lot that goes into it, but it does shake things up quite a bit in terms of rosters. And I want to start off talking about the SAC because we obviously had 3 teams share the victory bell, which is very rare in the SAC.
Sure.
So going into this season, who is your team to beat when it comes to ringing the victory bell in 2022?
Well, for me, it starts with the Snyder Panthers atop the SAC. And, that big win in Week 9 last year to knock Bishop Luers from the ranks of the unbeaten and then share a piece of the SAC last year for the Panthers. When you look at what Snyder is bringing back, when you look at Luke Halpert back, multiple year starter, no quarterback in the SAC for Snyder has ever had the amount of starts for him prior to his senior year as Luke Halpert. So he has that experience. You lose Tyrese Brown, but Langston Level at times last year was Brown's equal in terms of carrying the rock. They bring back production up front. So, Kamari Juarez on the outside is dangerous. And then defensively, I think they have the pieces too to be pretty sound. So when we look at complete teams, and I think that's how I'm judging the SAC right now, is complete teams, Snyder right there is number 1 for me.
And who might be right behind Snyder? Because this is, again, every 3, 4, 5 years, we get an SAC season where you go in and you're like, that's probably the team to beat, but this is pretty
Right.
wide open. It feels wide open.
Yeah.
You've got Northside with a nice collection of individual talent. The question is, how do they mesh together?
Sure.
You've got Bishop Dwenger, obviously, with some new pieces. Can Carrol continue after winning a piece of the SAC for the first time? Can they be up there? And we're not talking about Homestead, where
Right.
they just won back-to-back SAC titles not too long ago.
Yeah. All of the above. You can throw all those guys in the mix, all those teams in the mix. For me, I'm looking at Carrol as number 2. I don't think there's a better defensive unit in the SAC than Carroll's defensive unit. I think Braden Steely is a phenomenal player, is really going to burst onto the scene this year as one of the top players around, not just in the SAC. They have players at all 3 levels. You look at Jorge Valdez in the back end, Dylan Bennett in the middle of that defense. We mentioned Braden Steely, so they have some pieces up front as well. So looking at Carrol, and when we talked transfers, we talked like the potential of Jimmy Sullivan now sliding over to Carrol. We're not sure of his eligibility at this point. But, after the tragic loss of Owen Shealy, it kind of left that void at quarterback for Carrol. And when we're just talking on the field, you looked at it as says who replaces Owen, right? So I don't think they had a concrete answer for that, and maybe Jimmy Sullivan can be that answer. And if he can slide in and perform, then I think it makes Carrol a definite possibility to be a contender.
If there's a team in the SAC that can make a major jump this season, who is it? Because I know in my mind who it is.
You want to, yeah.
I know in my
you know
mind who it is, and I would love to see this program compete week in and week out in the SAC.
When you look at Northside coming off a 2-9 season,
That's not where I was going. That's not where I was going.
Okay, so when you look at Northside being 2-9 last year, and we talked about the hype going into the season last year, and they showed signs, right? In week 1, losing on that last second long kick there by Nick Talamentes to Snyder, and no team has a more difficult first 6 weeks of the season than Northside because they play arguably the top 6 teams in the league other than themselves. When you have Concordia, South, and Northrop, their final 3 weeks. So how do they handle that workload? So Northside, and then I think you're going to go the Wayne Generals.
I am going to go the Wayne Generals. I'm never discounting Sherwood Haydock.
Yeah.
In his 3rd year at Woodland, I mean, you got to remember where Woodland was before Sherwood Haydock got
right?
there. Year 3, they flip it around. Harding had a good year 3. I mean, this is a guy. I was talking to him in practice the other day, and he said, last time I was in the SAC, we didn't have 2,000 student schools like Carrol and Homestead to compete with. He's like, but I really feel like we're a lot closer to being a really good team. Now, again, does that mean, in the SAC, does being a lot better than you were the last year mean a lot more wins?
Right.
Not
necessarily, right?
Every coach out there would be like, maybe not.
Yeah.
But, with Nelson at the running back position, he's a beast. Nehemiah Young up there on the defensive line. Like, they've got some players.
When I talked to Sherwood Haydock, actually late last week, we were talking about something else, but he said, this is the first team that feels like my team. That feels like a Sherwood Haydock coach team. And year 3 is that pivotal year, right? When we're talking about rebuilding programs in high school and college level. They go from 2 wins as year 1. They go 4 wins last year. So, we're seeing that ascension. And then you mentioned it with proven backs coming. I feel like Lamarion Nelson could be the best running back in the entire area. I mean, that kid, you can give it to him 30 times a game if you need to. Nehemiah Young on the edge is just an absolute beast. So how does that defense in particular, can they stop people consistently? Weren't able to do that really last year. So they have some pieces. I don't think it's a team that competes for the SAC championship, but I think it's a team that, coming out of the gate, when they play Bishop Dwenger week 1, that could be a game that people, throughout the night are going, well, that's an interesting score.
Right.
So I definitely could be on board with you with the Wayne Generals.